Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about the U.S. Titanic, United States Titanic, the ship that they said could not sink.
From this moment, no matter what we do, Titanic will founder. But this ship can't sink. She's made of iron, sir. I assure you, she can. And she will. It is a mathematical certainty.
Okay, so things are not looking that good, and the reason we're talking about this is because I think that our lifestyles, our comfort of living levels, the type of work that we do is probably going to change over the next 5 to 20 years. Okay, so there's three things that made the United States a superpower. Okay, the three things, and we're going like way back. We're going to like all the way back to like the early 1900s. Okay, the three things were production. Okay, the United States was a big producer in the world. Okay, so that played a big role in why the United States was on the winning side of World War II. Okay, they could outproduce the Japanese, they could outproduce the Germans. Okay, so production. Okay, number two, war. United States was really good at war. Okay, for a variety of reasons, right? And these things are all kind of linked to each other. So part of the reason why the United States was good at war was because of its production. Okay, and number three, okay, the United States was so powerful because of the U.S. dollar being an international currency. Large banks, lots of large nations around the world held U.S. dollars as their reserve. Okay, so that these three things, they kind of all work together. Okay, so the problem that United States is having is like all three things are failing. Okay, so first let's talk about production. Okay, because that's the first thing, the first leg that got kicked out. Okay, so there's three legs to this stool. The first leg that got kicked out, or rather we actually ripped it off ourselves, okay, was production. Okay, so more and more of, like, since the end of World War II, more and more production was being shifted around the world, a lot of it ending up in China. And this benefited us for a long time because what we were able to do is, instead of using expensive labor here in the United States, we're able to export the production somewhere else and use much cheaper labor. And this worked really good because we were able to essentially print money, right, for a long time to buy these things. Okay, so when you look at trade, right, the way I like to look at trade is take the dollars out of it for a second and just look at goods. Okay, would you rather have more goods going out of the country, or would you rather have goods coming into the country? Okay, so naturally I want more things coming to me, right? And if I can have goods coming into me and I can pay for it with like worthless paper that I'm just printing up, that benefits me. Okay, so the United States being able to print up money and send it to China worked for a really long time. Okay, now the reason why we're able to print up this money and send it around the world is basically, first of all, we were established as the world's currency reserve, and we had the ability to use the war machine, right, the military, to kind of enforce that. Okay, so I mean, indirectly, right, especially in the Middle East where the oil was being produced, because dollars and oil are kind of closely tied together. The world runs on oil, and the means by which this oil is, has been traded back and forth is on U.S. dollars. So that's the reason why, a lot of times it's referred to as petrodollars. Okay, so that worked in our favor for a very long time. Okay, so we have no production, but essentially we're able to print up money and pay people to produce stuff for us very cheaply around the world. But the bad thing about this is that we've lost the ability to produce anything. Okay, anything of value in any in any large quantities. Okay, and I did a video a few days ago where we were looking at the world's ship production. Okay, who builds ships? Okay, so 50% of all the ships in the world are built in China. Okay, in the United States, we build 0.13% of the world's ships. Okay, so that's not 13%. If we were building 13% of the world's ships, that would be okay. But it's actually 0.13. So it's less than 1% of the world's ships. So the problem here is this kind of goes back to how did we win World War II with mass production? Okay, how on earth could we possibly win World War III if we can't produce ships, right? Because here's the thing, the ability to build ships is also reflective of our ability to build tanks, missiles, everything else, right? When we're talking about mass production. And it's really hard to go from building like 0.13% ships, right? And this works out to, and this is based on tonnage. So basically, China builds about 1,000 ships a year, right? Based on tonnage. United States builds 10, okay? So it's really hard to go from building 10 ships a year to 1,000 ships a year in a meaningful time, okay? I mean, you can maybe double it. Maybe you can go from 10 to 20 or from 20 to 30, okay? Maybe up to 50, right? If you really pushed it. But you're never going to go up to 1,000 ships, okay? So now you might say, hey, the ships that China produces, they're just cargo ships, right? Well, those can very easily be converted into, can use the same skills to build warships, okay? And it's a lot easier for China to go from building cargo ships to building warships than it is from us to go from building, or in case China, going specifically from 1,000 cargo ships to building 1,000 warships a year, than it is from the United States to go from building 10 warships a year to building 1,000. Can't be done. The people don't know how to do it. You can't train that many people fast enough. In China, they've already got people building ships, okay? So as far as production, we got nothing, okay? As far as war, right, which is the thing that's been keeping the United States a superpower, well, again, without production, you can't do war, okay? You're going to eventually, everything that you have is going to get blown up. I mean, that's just the nature of war. When the United States started World War II, I mean, they took losses, right? It took them a while to figure out how to use the equipment that they have. The benefit of the strength of the United States was after stuff got blown up, they could build more of it. Okay, I think like they lost 4 Sherman tanks for every 1 Tiger that was destroyed in Germany, but the United States could just keep pumping out more Shermans. Okay, so where we are right now, we have no production. We can't build war machinery anywhere near as fast as China. Okay, and you can't go again from building almost nothing to like really like, going from, let's say, 10 ships a year to 1,000 ships a year. You just can't do it, okay? It takes time to build that up. Essentially, it's not just a question of factories. It's a question of people wanting to work, right? Because in the United States, we have a welfare society, okay? Why would people want to work if they can get money for free, right? And get food for free. So first, you got to cut off the welfare and give people an incentive to work. Okay, Democrats will never do that because that's the only thing that keeps anybody voting for Democrats. So that's like a no way, right? So you have no way of going from a welfare society to going to a production society. I mean, it's the current political climate. Doesn't matter who's elected, you can't do it because even, let's say, if you get somebody like Trump elected, and if he tries to just cut off the welfare and get everybody back to work, people are going to revolt, okay? People don't want to go back to work. So, I mean, we're stuck with that. So let's take a look at this war in Ukraine for a second, right? On the war side. So the United States thought that they were just going to, like Russia was just going to collapse. And all the information is showing that Russia is actually doing really well over there, right? They're defeating Ukraine. They're destroying whatever equipment or, whatever resources the United States and NATO sends over there. They're targeting. I mean, anything that the Russians want to destroy, they're able to destroy. Okay, so now this doesn't immediately affect us here inside the United States, but what this means is that the United States is no longer going to be able to project its power the way it thought it could. Okay, so this is indicative of our power projection. And the power projection part is really important, right? Because that's the main thing that has been that's been supporting the third leg of the stool, right? The U.S. dollar being the currency that the world runs on. Okay, so basically the United States could, no other currency in the world could stay stable long enough for it to kind of replace the U.S. dollar, because the United States could always find ways to weaken it. Like I remember back in the Vietnam War era, it was known that the United States was printing up North Vietnamese money and flooding the country with it to destabilize their currency. So it's fair to assume that they never stopped that strategy. I mean, it's a working strategy. So that's one of the strategies that the United States was able to use, amongst others, to make sure that the United States was like the most stable currency in the world. And what happened is, because the United States was the world dominant currency, what they could do is they could continue to print money, right? They call it borrowing, okay? A trillion, I've said this before, a trillion seconds is 31,000 years. There's nobody to borrow $1 trillion from, okay? That kind of money doesn't exist. So they're just printing up the money, and what happens is the national debt just represents how much money has been printed up. It's essentially how much our money has been diluted, okay? So every time the United States borrows money, they're printing it up, diluting the existing money. So when the government prints up money and dilutes your money, what they're doing is they're reducing the buying power of your money. So it's a tax. They've taxed you, okay? So when the United States is able to do this, they're also taxing the entire world, because they're reducing the buying power of everybody around the world. So the reason why the United States has been such a great power, right, without production, without being able to without needing to produce anything useful, is because they're able to tax the entire world through money dilution. And up until now, the world hasn't had any alternative, right? Because they're like, okay, yeah, the United States is printing up money, but what else are we going to use? Okay, there's nothing else. Okay, so now these sanctions that came out of this Ukraine-Russia war, right? The United States froze some $300 billion worth of assets that Russia had, and they've even made efforts to try and confiscate that. And what that did is that made the rest of the world really nervous, because they're like, if the United States can just take Russia's money, $300 billion, imagine what they can do to little old us. Okay, so there's another alliance. You got the G7 economic alliance, right? The G7 countries, and then you have BRICS, which is the main countries in that are Brazil, Russia, India, China. Okay, so those are like the main countries, but I think there's like 40 other countries that are either part of it or trying to get into it. Okay, even France tried to get into it, but they were rejected. So what BRICS is trying to do is they're trying to de-dollarize, right? They're trying to get away from the dollar. And right now, what they're trying to do is its members are trying to do their business transactions in their local currencies. Okay, so they haven't come up with a replacement currency, but what they're doing is they're saying, hey, why do we, like, if for example, Saudi Arabia and China want to do a transaction, they want to trade oil, right? They're like, wait a second, Saudi Arabia wants to sell oil to China. Why does China need to buy that oil in U.S. dollars? Why not buy it in Saudi Arabian money or in Chinese money? And then they can basically just do business back and forth with each other using their currencies. Okay, so this is hurting the United States, because again, if they're doing business in some other currency than U.S. dollars, okay, Number one, the United States is not able to tax them through inflation. But then what happens is, as U.S. dollars are not being used, what's happening with those U.S. dollars? Well, eventually they lose value. If they're not using it, they're just going to dump it back into the market, and it loses value. And we see that as even more inflation. Okay, so the United States does, because this Ukraine war is showing us they no longer have the power projection that they thought they had. Okay, they're not able to enforce the U.S. dollar as the currency that everybody must do business in, and hence they're not able to tax them. Okay, so the combination of these three things. Okay, no production. Okay, so you don't produce anything, right? The world's no longer valuing your dollars, right? So you've been able to not produce anything, but you've been able to buy it with money that you're printing up. But the problem is that the world slowly is going to stop accepting that money that you're printing up. So now you have you don't have production in this country, and you don't have anything valuable to trade for the goods that you want. Okay, so the situation I see here is in a few years, we don't have any shoe factories here in the United States. China's not going to be accepting U.S. dollars. We're all going to be, walking around barefoot. Okay, I mean, I'm exaggerating there, but that's the problem I'm seeing here, right? We have no production. We're buying everything from China. Pretty soon we're not going to have anything valuable that China wants, right? Because they're not going to want our U.S. dollars. So how are we going to buy the things that we need? Okay, and then in the middle over here, our ability to project our strength, that all changed in Ukraine. Okay, what we saw in Ukraine is that it's almost like a new type of warfare. They're using drones. They're able to. The United States was like, the Russians were putting up like $500 drones, and the United States had to use like $1 million missiles to try and shoot them down. Okay, so obviously that's losing economics. And what happened is the United States and Ukraine here is like they're running out of $1 million missiles, but the Russians are still able to send out $500 drones, right? And now they don't have any more $1 million missiles to shoot down those $500 drones. Okay, so these are the three legs that the U.S. Titanic is standing on. All right, or propelling, or the three engines that the Titanic here is using to propel itself through the ocean. Okay. Production, which we no longer have. Okay. Our military dominance, which post-Ukraine war we no longer have. Okay. And the U.S. dollar as a worldwide currency, which the world is now making an effort to get away from. They don't want to do business in U.S. dollars. They no longer want to be taxed through inflation. Okay, they're looking for alternative currencies. And here's the thing: if they were trying to if their mission was to create an alternative currency from scratch, I would say, yeah, forget it. It'll take them 50 years. But the thing is, they've actually done the smart thing here. They're like, wait a second, let's just use all local currencies temporarily. Down the road, maybe we'll create some international currency. But for now, let's just use our currencies to do business amongst ourselves and deal out the United States and their U.S. dollar. Okay. So this does not look good for the United States. Okay, it does not look good because these are the three things that basically have kept the United States afloat, right? Or made the United States, right? The three things that made the United States a world power is production, we no longer have. It's military ability, right, which is now questionable after this war in Ukraine. Okay, and certainly our ability to project power, right, to project it, to be able to influence other countries around the world. And I see a situation where a lot of these small countries that the United States was trying to bully, I see them as now going to China and Russia and saying, hey, can you protect us from the United States? Okay, that's the situation I see developing here. In which case the aircraft carriers that the United States have are not going to be that useful. Okay, I mean, it's just the dynamics of the world are changing. Okay, and long term, okay, If China's producing like 1,000 ships a year, United States only producing 10. I mean, yeah, okay, great. The United States has what, 20 aircraft carriers. I mean, within 20 years, I can easily see China surrounding the United States with 100 aircraft carriers, right? United States can't produce 100, 200 aircraft carriers, 500 aircraft. China can do that. Yes, maybe they're gonna suck initially, but they'll figure out how to use them and they'll figure out how to improve them. Okay, so we just don't have production in the United States. Okay, which means lack of production is going to mean a lack of war capability. Okay, and then the third leg of this stool is the U.S. dollar, which is the only thing that the United States has been riding on, right? Just being able to print money and buy the goods that it wants, right? And keep everybody on welfare and saying, hey, don't worry, we're going to give you some money here. Use this printed up money to go buy whatever you want from China. Well, China's going to be like, we're not taking U.S. dollars anymore. Okay, you better come up with you got to use our currency now, all right? So I'm like, where are we gonna get Chinese currency, whatever they're using, to buy anything from China, right? Because in order to get currency from China, you have to give them something valuable, and we've got nothing valuable to give them. Okay, so anyway, those are my thoughts. I mean, I think that this is a really bad situation. Okay, I don't see a solution to this. Okay, so drop some comments and let me know what you guys think.